Right, so following the realization that the Olympus EM5 Mark III wasn't the hybrid camera that I was looking for in terms of offering up something that would meet my photography and my videoing needs, I've come full circle back to the Osmo Pocket. Yeah, so as I'm back to using the Osmo Pocket for the majority of my videos, I thought I'd take the time to learn a bit more about the Osmo Pocket and its capabilities in order to try and improve my footage on this channel. But in order to do that, there's a few bugbears that I've had with the Osmo Pocket which led me down the path of trying to find a camera that could do it all in the first place. The main one is the fact that I haven't found in the past that the Osmo is great at capturing clean video in lower light or in the shadows. I find that it can produce some really ugly noise. So that was one of my main reasons for going for a camera like my Olympus EM5 Mark III, which has a larger sensor than the one in the Osmo, to try and get that low light performance enhancement. So to tackle that issue, I've basically done a bit of research, and there's a setting on the Osmo called Superfine. So up until this point, I've always stayed away from Superfine because when I've trialed it in the past, I haven't really seen that much difference to the kind of standard normal fine preset. But I think where I have started to notice the difference is in that lower light and in the shadows. When I've seen some videos online, it's quite evident that there's a degree of noise reduction going on with that quality setting. So yeah, so I'm going to have that setting on now for my videos. I'll go out and take some B-roll in the dark or lower light conditions and compare it with fine, so hopefully you can then see the difference that those two quality settings offer up. The second problem I've always had with the Osmo Pocket is obviously when you turn on the recording mode, it automatically, if it detects a face, turns on face tracking, and I find that that almost creates too much movement in the actual scene, and it can be a little bit distracting, I guess, for the viewer. Like, to demonstrate, I'll just turn on face tracking. Right, so face tracking is now on. So if I start to kind of like drift around, the Osmo will probably track me quite well. And whilst that's not too bad in this situation where I'm just kind of sat down, when I'm standing around and just hopping from foot to foot, I do find that it is a little bit disconcerting, because now I can see the gimbal head of the Osmo is jittering around. Again, it's just my laziness in that I didn't really learn how to use the Osmo, but with a click of a button here, you can turn the face tracking off. So now if I move, it doesn't move with me, which is fine for probably 99% of my needs with the Osmo. I just don't need that face tracking ability, because I always assumed that you needed that face tracking on for the Osmo to keep your face in focus, but I think it does a pretty good job without that face tracking on. I think the face tracking is just the Osmo's ability to be more like an action camera to keep the subject in its frame, so to speak. Because I think generally it still keeps me in focus, even if I move over here, or if I move back a bit. It still probably is doing a good job at keeping me in focus, but obviously I'll see when I review the footage back. So yeah, so low light, hopefully I've probably not cured it, but I've made it more bearable. 2, I've turned the face tracking off, so the scene is a lot more static for my talking heads mainly. And thirdly as well, again, it's me being lazy, but even though I've bought an ND variable filter for the Osmo, I've never actually used it before. So now I'm in manual mode, so I'm at 2.7K, 30 frames per second, the shutter speed is 160 per second, and the ISO is 100, because I think this is a critical thing as well with the low light, is keeping that ISO down as low as possible, because the higher it is, the more noise the camera is going to introduce into your footage. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more proactive with recording the best footage I can at the time of these kind of videos. And it's the same with stills, you know, you always try to get the exposure right in camera first, you know, with neutral density filters, with graduated filters, with exposure compensation. And for video, for me, it should be no difference really. So hopefully I can strive to achieve the similar kind of results that I'm looking for straight out of the Osmo. I'm filming this now at 2.7K 30 frames per second. I'd like obviously to record it at 4K 30 frames per second, but that is one of the limitations with the Osmo Pocket, in that super fine mode to reduce the noise doesn't work at 4K 30 frames per second. You're only limited to normal fine mode at that frame rate, whereas it works fine at 2.7K 30 frames per second and probably 1080p as well. So that is a bit of a limitation, but I'm guessing in this kind of condition, 4K 30 frames per second fine would be absolutely fine to use, because it's not going to be noisy at all. Whereas perhaps then I'll flick down to the 2.7K 30 frames per second when the light does start to drop and I do need that super fine mode to keep the noise levels down in my video. Right, the third thing I'm going to try and improve as well is, obviously I'd like to use the Osmo, because it's so pocketable, to do all my B-roll capturing. And I've always found in the past that when I turn it on, I try to get it out into the area that I want to capture the B-roll, and I find that it doesn't really stabilize that well. Like, I'll take a 20-second duration of video and I'll find that only a few seconds of that is actually stabilized enough for me to think that it's usable in my videos. And that's generally because the gimbal is kind of all over the place and it takes a while to settle onto the scene that I want it to capture. So what I found, again, through reading the manual and tutorials from other YouTubers, is that there's a function on the Osmo called tilt lock, and that helps to keep the horizon basically locked. So you can probably see now it's quite flat, and it almost limits the range of the gimbal head movement. So I'm hoping that that will help me create quicker stabilized footage. And another thing I've put on as well is I've had the control wheel for the Osmo Pocket for a while, but I've never really used it. Again, I've been a bit lazy, but I do find that actually it does help you control your movements a lot better. And again, I find it does really help create that stabilized footage. Like, I'll just do a demonstration now. I'm in my favorite churchyard here in Dorset again, and what I'll do is I'll just flip the screen round and I'll just gently pan the camera around so you can kind of see this movement that I'm looking for, more stabilized straight off the bat. And hopefully I won't need to kind of edit any of this out to kind of eliminate the footage where it's not quite as good as I was expecting. So here we go, I'll flip it round and we'll start the panning. Might just need to switch the other plane on. I guess the only potential problem is this is while I'm kind of holding the control wheel, I can see that the Osmo Pocket is moving, so I'm not quite sure how well that footage is going to be. So if I flip it around again, back onto me, it's pretty good, but then it's automatically defaulted to that face track, so it's probably tracking my movements. So just one button on the Osmo and that turns that off. And then I think then I can still use the control wheel here to position me better in the frame. So yeah, I think that's definitely going to be, if I take the time to set it up, that's definitely going to help improve my footage, I feel. It's getting used to this ND filter though, because it's very tiny on screen telling you what the exposure actually is in this pro mode on the Osmo. But I'm sure I'll get better as the time goes on. One thing as well is like now I've got the Rode Wireless Go plugged in and the actual dead cat is actually staying on for the first time in like ages, but I'm sure if I just touch it, it will come off, because I haven't really found this to be the most secure thing in the world. This is the second time I've tried to film this video. I did a bit of a lazy video the other day and I didn't even take my mics or anything, and I was just relying on the internal mics of the Osmo Pocket, and I was actually surprised at how well that they did. And I'll just put up a little bit of footage now. And here's the 5 o'clock train coming through as well, so you're probably not going to be able to hear me at all. But anyway, I'll switch to the fine mode now and we'll just see. So while I'm here as well, I thought, and I did this with when I had the Olympus EM5 Mark III earlier in the year, I did like a camera conspiracies type face tracking challenge, and that wasn't, I think in that video I concentrated more on the actual Olympus EM5 Mark III, so I thought I'd do the same today but concentrating more on the Osmo Pocket, especially now I've managed to turn off that face tracking ability, or I know at least how to turn that tracking facility off in an easier way, because that way it won't then, if I move out of the frame, like if I move out of the frame now and then come back in, it probably will pick up my face again, but it wouldn't have tried to track it, which is when the gimbal tends to go to its limitations and then stop tracking you, and then it doesn't then try to find you again. Even if you come back into the scene, you would have to press the buttons on the front to get it to then recenter and then relock onto you. This must be the most challenging light conditions for filming. The sun is just in and out of clouds, so one moment I'm in perfect exposure, the next moment I'm overexposed, the next moment I'm underexposed. I guess this is the beauty of having the Osmo Pocket just deal with the exposure automatically, but then you don't necessarily get that consistent look. So I think when I come back into the scene, it does kind of put a box on my face. So whether that's good enough. Yeah, so just for fun as well, I've just done a montage with my Olympus EM1 Mark 1. So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you were able to get something out of it. If you've got any queries or any other tips or tricks that I could try with the Osmo to help improve its performance for my channel, then please put them in the comments below. If not, thanks for watching. See you next time.